Welcome, San Mateo. I'm going to let everyone just come in to the room. We've got attendees coming in right now. My name is Michael Hopsch. I'm going to be your moderator tonight. We've got a 90-minute session with some incredible panelists here. And we still have some folks coming into the room here, I see, so I'm going to give them just a few more seconds. All right, I see folks still coming into the room. All right, well, we just hit 500, so I think we'll go with that. And as people come in, we will welcome them. And this is going to be a recorded town hall, and we're going to make this available online on our social media platforms soon, as soon as the meeting is over with. So good evening and welcome to our town hall. Due to the physical distancing protocols in place at this time, we're holding this town hall virtually. Thank you for joining us. We've prepared some questions for our panelists. So please use Zoom's Q&A option or submit an email to pdpio@cityofsanmateo.org. We're conscious of everyone's time, and we've allotted 90 minutes for our panelists. Our goal is to get your questions answered during these sessions. If we run out of time, we will be responding to each of you after the town hall. Now, last week's terrible events in Minneapolis, together with the too many other occurrences around the country, are tragic and heartbreaking. In addition, the civil unrest leaves many of our citizens and business owners feeling unsure about what our future actually looks like. Let us be clear, your police department is fully staffed, watching, listening, learning, and we want every single one of our citizens to know we are fully committed and standing beside you against racism and discrimination wherever it exists. This reality, coupled with the COVID crisis, highlights the inequities minority communities face every day, and it strengthens our resolve to do more as individuals, as a police department, and in our community. Now, more than ever, we must be inclusive in making San Mateo better and ripple the successes of our community throughout the world. Above all else, we want our community to know that we are here to listen and learn to make ourselves better to serve you. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists who have graciously agreed to join us for this discussion today. Chief Ed Barberini brings 25 years of law enforcement experience, including having spent the last 5 years as chief of the San Bruno Police Department and 2 years as chief of the Millbrae Police Bureau. Officer Lorrie McMilton is the president of the San Mateo Police Officers Association. He's been in law enforcement for 20 years and is currently working patrol here in San Mateo. Sitting beside him is Officer Allison Gilmore. She's also on the board, and she manages the police officers' welfare for the San Mateo Police Department. Her past work as an attorney prepared her well during her past 2 years as a patrol officer. San Mateo Mayor Joe Goethals is a lifelong resident of San Mateo and has been on the city council since 2013. Reverend Dr. Penny Nixon has been the senior minister of the Congregational Church of San Mateo, United Church of Christ, short for CCSM. CCSM is a vibrant, progressive spiritual community of over 600 members, and in 2017 received the MLK Award for the County of San Mateo. A community leader and political activist, she has received numerous awards and recognitions for her work in both San Francisco and San Mateo. Most recently, she was named 2019 Woman of the Year for Assembly District 22. She also is the co-editor of the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, which is a group of 40 interfaith clergy engaged in addressing the most pressing social needs in San Mateo County. Reverend Dr. Marlyn Bussey is the proud pastor of St. James AIM Zion Church in San Mateo. She's also the co-director of the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort and an interfaith clergy group that leverages moral power for the common good. And while Reverend Lorrie Owens is relatively new to her role as the president of the San Mateo Naacp, she is not new to San Mateo, nor to the Naacp. She has been a member of the Naacp most of her adult life. She has worked in San Mateo County for decades and currently serves as a chief technology officer for a local organization. Foundational to her work in technology and in her civil rights is her faith. Reverend Owens is the assistant pastor of His Gospel Christian Fellowship in Oakland. John Keene serves as the San Mateo County Probation Chief and has done so since 2013. Before his appointment, Chief Keene worked for the Alameda County Probation Department and the Louisiana Department of Public Safety. Steve Wagstaff has been a prosecutor for the San Mateo County District Attorney's Office for 43 years and has been the elected district attorney for 9.5 years. Now that the introductions are completed, I want to thank the panelists again for graciously joining us. And I'd like to thank all the community members who have shown up to this town hall to be part of this discussion. Questions will be taken via the Zoom Q&A, so please submit them through there, or you can submit them by email, pdpio@cityofsanmateo.org. Please know this time is made for us to learn, to make ourselves better as public servants to the city of San Mateo. This is the start of a longer discussion that we hope to continue having as time goes on. We'll also make a survey available at the end of this Zoom. Please take the time to take that survey so that we know whether or not you like this or if you didn't, and that way we can decide on whether or not we're going to continue these. A message to the panelists, if you can please, if you are not answering a question, if you can please mute and remove your video so that we can help with the broadband and so that we don't eat up too much of that, so that folks can focus on the person that's speaking. That would be really appreciated. So without further ado, let's get this going. Chief Ed Barberini, let's start with you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate the introduction and nice job putting this together. Thank you very much. Let me start by stating clearly that what we saw and what we observed happened in Minneapolis with Mr. Floyd's death is something that troubles us all. In fact, it angers us and outrages it. It causes great outrage among the law enforcement community. I haven't spoke with any of my peers or colleagues that haven't shared this level of disappointment, frustration, and anger regarding this type of incident happening. Given that, we also recognize that no agency is immune from use of force challenges. The San Mateo Police Department has experienced its own challenges when it comes to use of force. And frankly, it would be irresponsible for anybody to guarantee that we're not going to run into similar circumstances in the future. However, it would be just as irresponsible to not seek every avenue available to us to prevent this from ever happening again. Now, in response to this incident, as you can imagine, we've received a great deal of inquiry about the level of training and whether or not an incident that happened in Minnesota could occur in the city of San Mateo or the Bay Area. A lot of these questions have focused on our training. And I want to assure you that the San Mateo Police Department, and I'm confident in working with our neighbors, receives or provides the highest level of training to its officers when it comes to de-escalation, use of force, implicit bias, recognizing bias, and fair and equitable policing. Training is important to us as a state, as a county, and in San Mateo as a police department. Even with that level of training, Cops, police officers are human beings and prone to making mistakes like everybody else. However, I want to make it very, very clear. What happened in Minneapolis and in some of the other instances that we've talked about was not a mistake. Rather, it's something that speaks to integrity and character. And frankly, character and integrity are things that are often unable to be taught and are part of a person's individual makeup and background. So how do we address that? How do we deal with issues and circumstances that can't simply be taught in a classroom? Well, there's a few ways that we as a police department, along with other law enforcement agencies, try to take steps to ensure that we are addressing those issues early on, and it starts with the hiring process. As many can imagine, and I'm sure many have heard the stories, becoming a police officer is no easy task. Not only does it take a great deal of perseverance and sometimes luck and being in the right place at the right time, giving the number of jobs that are available compared to those that are interested. A prospective applicant also navigates through an incredibly selective and strict vetting process. The background investigation is something that's thorough and complete, includes a psychological test, a medical test, and even a polygraph examination. Now, that's just part of the story when it comes to selecting police officers. Here in San Mateo, we're fortunate to have both a diverse and well-educated police force. And when I talk about diversity, I am talking about a diverse makeup when it comes to race. It comes to, when you look at our officers, you're going to see a diverse group, and that's good. I'm proud of that. But what I'm just as proud of is the diversity that comes from the diverse backgrounds and experiences that our officers have. Regardless of the color of their skin, sometimes we're seeking individuals who have a strong background, a strong life experience that bring that to our organization to better serve the public. We're not looking to be an echo chamber. We don't want someone to enter our ranks that's going to just blindly share ideas and not have a mind of their own and a sense of right and wrong that defines that character integrity that we talk about. So when I talk about diversity, I talk about much more than what we traditionally talk about. All of those components make up a well-rounded human being at the end of the day that we're looking for to serve the public. In addition to hiring, the focus on a level of integrity, a level of care and compassion for the community must be an ongoing emphasis within any successful police department. And having been fairly new here, I was pleased and excited to walk into an environment where I immediately observed that care for the community, that care and dedication to service. It makes my job a little bit easier, but on the other hand, it makes it much more difficult. The bar is high here in San Mateo, and it's my job to maintain that high bar regarding the level of service that we provide to the community. But this conversation is much more about training. It's much more about hiring practices. It's much more about vetting out those candidates that may not be appropriate for this line of work. We face difficult challenges now, and we face difficult challenges for a long time that may take a great deal of time and effort to work through. There are likely no answers on the immediate horizon, and it's going to take a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get through this and make real progress. Conversations like this are just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. And I look forward to. I'm hopeful that the response is positive to this format. However, I'd love to do it in person in the not too distant future, so that we can continue these conversations and really get down to what's important and discuss some real issues. Now, I realize that 90 minutes with 8 panelists is just the tip of the iceberg, and we're just going to scratch the surface. But if we can lay the groundwork for something more, I think that's a step in the right direction. I'd like to very much thank our panelists for agreeing to participate with us this evening. I have a tremendous amount of respect for each of you, and I look forward to learning a lot in the next hour and a half. That'll not only make my department stronger and make us a better police department, but it'll make me a better person and make me better at what I do. So thank you, Michael, for the opportunity to address everyone, and I look forward to listening and learning. Thanks.
Absolutely, Chief, and that's what we're here for. Thank you very much for your remarks. Reverend Dr. Penny Nixon, I'd like to call on you. You serve a diverse congregation. What are your suggestions on how we can work together to give every person in our community a platform to be heard and the space to collaborate with police officers in keeping San Mateo safe?
Thank you, Michael, and thank you so much, Chief. And hello, everybody. It's a pretty huge question, and I think we can only know the answer with our collective wisdom, because it takes all of us. And I think first of all, I think you have to acknowledge the pain, and I felt like, Chief, you did that today. You acknowledge the pain of what's going on in our country. I appreciate your professionalism and your humility, your willingness to listen. And so I would invite you to continue to listen. I think that listen to different people's experiences, because we all have to recognize that we each have different experiences in this country, depending on the color of our skin, vastly different experiences. I think we have to find ways for people to tell their stories so that we can listen deeply, and so that those stories can be affirmed. Those experiences can be affirmed. Those realities can be affirmed, so that we have a fuller picture of what really goes on sometimes and the depth of pain. I think you as a police department can be as transparent as possible. I know that you work on that, and to be even more so. And to do exactly what you did today, at the very beginning, and that is to renounce the brutality that is so evident and brings into such sharp relief the systemic and institutionalized racism in our country, which is on all of us, particularly as white people. You know, the other thing that I kept thinking about, especially for you as police officers, people with a particular kind of authority and responsibility, is that find ways to tell us your stories, so that help us humanize you, just like we want you to humanize all of us, and particularly some of us. And know that you don't have to do it alone. And that's what you're doing today, calling on community leaders, people of faith, people with all different kinds of expertise and stories. And I think if we can continue to open avenues like this, it will make a difference. And as the Chief already said, really it's walking the talk of some of the things that you have put out there today. Again, thank you for this time, for this venue to be heard and to discuss, and I look forward to more.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Penny Nixon. That was incredible, and humanizing law enforcement and humanizing people, really, on both sides is what it's all about. And I think meetings like this actually tears down that wall of the us versus them and just makes it just about us and just about humanity. And so thank you very much for your remarks. District Attorney Steve Wagstaffe, if you can turn your video on, we've got a question for you. When you investigate or evaluate use of force by police officers, can you describe what that process looks like in San Mateo County?
Sure, and thank you again for letting me participate today, Michael and Chief. Following up on what the Reverend Doctor just said, I have to start it by saying how the word that has been in my mind over the last few days has been looking for hope, because it's too easy to be discouraged by this. I think I'm probably the one with the longest tooth on this panel, with 43 years at the DA's office. And after watching what's occurred, the brutality of what occurred back in Minnesota, it just causes me great discouragement, and yet I struggle. And that's why I love hearing what you had to say, Reverend Dr. Nixon. We're struggling for hope. In San Mateo County, anytime there is an officer in this county, officer or a deputy sheriff, or any law enforcement officer engages in the use of force that results in harm to a citizen, it is not investigated by the law enforcement agency for the criminal purposes. That is the role of the district attorney. This was not always the case. It was only about 25 years ago, our police chiefs in this county said, you know what, they shouldn't be investigating themselves. They would investigate, turn it over to us for review. There should be an independent person doing it, and they asked the district attorney's office to do it. We have done that for, again, the last quarter century. When we get the report that somebody has been, whether it's a shooting or a use of a force of some sort, whatever it may be. Last year we had, a year and a half ago, we had numerous taser cases. We immediately do the investigation. Obviously, the local law enforcement agency is involved because they have to do their internal affairs investigation. But whether it was a criminal use of force or a lawful use of force by the officer is done by us. I have a team that responds. I have a Chief Inspector, John Warren, who responds to all of these, every one of them. And he brings his team out. It's usually between 6 and 8 investigators of my office. Most of these investigators did come from local law enforcement before they joined my office, but we never allow one of my agents to be involved in an investigation if that was his original agency. We are striving for independence. We will conduct the investigation working with the San Mateo County Forensic Laboratory, if it's a death, with the coroner's office, and we do all the witness interviews, and we will interview the officer or officers that are involved in the event. The goal we have is to investigate it as we would any crime, any incident, to determine, did a crime occur? We do want to interview the officers. Officers are like any other citizen. They have a right to speak or not speak to us. They have a right to an attorney before they speak to us. In this county over the years, and easily well over 90% of the cases, the officers do choose to speak to us, be interviewed by us. Those interviews are always recorded. They are always video recorded, available for others. We then put the entire collection of evidence together, and then my team, strictly within my office, there's no outside people. When they sit down, and my team of investigators and prosecutors will give me counsel on whether we think the law was complied with or whether there was a violation of the law. We do that in every one of these cases. We try to be fair to all sides. We maintain contact with the person who has been the subject of the force, whether, again, it's the officer using firearm or some other means of force. And we talk with them. We talk with the families of those persons. We talk, if they have a family attorney, we speak with them. And we try to be as fair as we can. The key thing that we do, not all counties do it this way, it really varies among the 58 counties, other than it is always the district attorney that makes the ultimate decision on it. Ultimately, though, what we do is we will make that decision. I will prepare a letter that I sign, that I send to the agency, advising whether I found it to be a proper use of force, an improper use of force, or perhaps an improper use of force, but not enough that we will be able to obtain a conviction. The decision I'm making is whether a crime occurred, the same as I do on every case that exists in this county, whether it be robbery, homicide, whatever it may be. We always make that. But there is one thing different in these cases, because we do view these cases, and these are the only cases out of all the 20,000 cases we review every year and make our charging and prosecutorial decision. Every single document that I read in making my decision, and usually this will be hundreds, if not thousands of pages of reports, every single one of those at the end, we make available to the public. They can come in and view everything. They get to come in, anybody who wants, any member of the public can come in and view any videos that we have, whatever it may be. We will make it available because these cases are in a unique status. This is where society has entrusted to law enforcement the power to use force, to use deadly force in certain circumstances. And because of that, we feel that the public has a right to review what the decision is. They may agree or disagree with my decision. But the one thing that they will have is they will have everything that I've reviewed, and we won't hold back in that line, other than things that may be by California state law, not public, cannot be in any circumstance. But that's very seldom, very much. That's our process, Michael. That's what we aim to do. Our goal is to be as fair as we can and be as transparent. I think, as somebody, the chief said, transparency is a crucial item here, and hence we make it available to everybody. And that's how the system works, Michael.
Thank you very much, DA Wagstaff. You know, transparency is crucial, especially these days, just so that, you know, people from all sides can come in and take a look at what the process is like, and you know, what investigative steps you take and your office takes to make sure that it is a just case, and if you have to prosecute it, it's a justly prosecuted case. So thank you very much for your time, sir. I'd like to welcome the San Mateo Police Officers Association. We're lucky enough to have 2 board members on there that are actually working the front line today. They're patrol officers, Officers Roy McMilton and Allison Gilmore. You've seen this video out of Minneapolis, and now you see what's going on across the nation. From a line officer's perspective, what are your feelings about what's happening right now? And I'd like to hear from both of you, please.
Yeah, of course. I'll go first if that's okay. Thank you, Mike, for the question. Thank you, Chief Barberini, for organizing this event. And thank you for inviting the POA. We're really appreciative of the opportunity to speak on this panel. And we also thank all the other panelists for coming and joining us. The feelings I had when I first saw the video, Mike, as well, I was frustrated, angry, very similar feelings that Chief Barberini had. I was also very sad for Mr. Floyd's family and him, and it was absolutely a horrible video. No officer I have spoke to feels any different than I have. That being said, everybody I've spoken to about this in my association, they realize that this incident and incidents like it have really done damage to the relationship that police officers across the nation have with their communities, and we're not immune to that here. We know that the faith that the community has in us as a police department is the bedrock on what we build our success as a law enforcement agency upon. So without that trust, without that faith in us, this department would not be as successful as it has been in the past. We're, you know, a top tier agency, and you see other police departments that don't have the faith of the community behind them, and they don't nearly do the type of professional work and have the kind of results that we do. So we're very appreciative of the relationship that we do have with this community, and our officers are very aware of the fact that, you know, it's been damaged, and that we are also very committed to repairing that by engaging with the community, doing what we need to do to get back to that level of trust that we've enjoyed before.
Going off of Rory's point, and once again, thank you to all the other panelists and everyone who's listening. I was completely saddened by everything that's happened in the last few days. If you pay close attention to all the ramifications, consequences, and actions that have happened and result afterwards, I don't know that we quite imagined this kind of consequence to this. Here in San Mateo, we are valued as police officers. We love our community, and first and foremost, in talking with other officers, my fellow officers on a day-to-day, we are all saddened. We are all moved by the video as a reminder that we are, as law enforcement, the most visible branch of the government. And when that fails, or when that harms individual members of our society, especially members of our society that feel that their voices are not heard, the impact is not only great, it ends up being something that we can get to the point where it's irreparable. And right now we're at a crisis point, whether or not we want to admit that so much in those words, but we're at a crisis point. Our reputation is in danger by the actions of a few. I know for a fact that I'm proud to serve with the people that share this patch with me. The man to my right was my primary FTO. I work alongside people of various backgrounds, various different cultural identities, and we all come together here to serve this greater good. I know for me, in the last few days, I have had members, particularly African-American people, come towards me and talk to me and want to have a dialogue about what's going on. They see me in the uniform, and some of them have said, you know, I know you have a hard role right now, and some of them have expressed anger and frustration. And it's been eye-opening for me. It's been challenging, and it's also still rewarding, because I know that we're doing good work. I know that we do not stand for injustice. I know that we stand against all of those things that have happened, and we're here for our community.
Thank you. Thank you both. And for anyone watching that doesn't know what FTO stands for, it's Field Training Officer. So our police officers have to not only graduate the police academy, well, first be selected and then graduate the police academy, but they have one-on-one supervision with a police officer for a minimum of 12 weeks. So there's a lot of scrutiny put on our officers that are coming on to the police department for several months. So I'd like to call, thank you both very much. I'd like to call Dr. Reverend Marlyn Bussey. Thank you. So as an African American and a pastor of a congregation, can you provide us with your perspective on the interactions of the San Mateo Police Department and the community? What works, and how can we do better as an organization?
Certainly. I want to thank you, Michael, and Chief Barberini for this opportunity. This has been a rough few weeks. Rougher all the time, it seems, every day. But I want to speak to the fact that being the oldest African-American church in San Mateo gives St. James AME Zion Church a rich and long history in social justice and in political activism in both of those arenas. St. James was one of the churches that was a diverse church when diversity was not popular, way back in the 40s and the 50s. And as such, the church has always had a relationship with the San Mateo Police Department, sometimes smoother than others. There was a long period of time before community policing was begun, when the community that I serve, North Central, was a real hotspot for gang activity and for a lot of problems with the police department. And so I think really that personal relationship is the key. When people in the community begin to know their law enforcement officials as good people and as allies, then a camaraderie builds. And that camaraderie is priceless. I worked at Sequoia High School for 25 years, and we had SROs, and the children got to know those police officers, and they trusted them, and the relationship that was built was very powerful for both the officers and for the students. And I think just like that can happen in a school, it can happen in a community. The challenge is that just like African Americans are negatively portrayed in the media far too often, more often than not, the police force is also portrayed negatively in times like these. What happened in Minnesota cast a shadow on every single law enforcement officer, which doesn't feel fair, and it's not fair. By the same token, when people of color are cast with the same and painted with the same brush, regardless of knowing anything else about them, that doesn't feel fair either. And so I think the way to combat this and to really infuse some hope into this situation is for police officers to get to know the families they serve. You know, walk the blocks, ask kids their names, you know, become someone that children can come to if something's wrong, rather than being afraid and running from law enforcement. There's so much pain, there is so much heartache and so much fear out there right now. And I believe that this may be a tipping point for our country. And I pray that it is, that we will finally get to the bottom of this. But I think with regard to the community, the best way to build a relationship that works is for everybody to just get to know everyone else. And I think when that happens, there's a kind of trust that's built that is really pretty priceless.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Bussey. Really appreciate you taking the time. And you made some great points. You know, having police officers get out of their patrol cars, get off of their motorcycles and walk the block and shake hands and get to know who's actually living there, because it really does put a face to the people that we serve. And there's nothing more important than knowing the people that you're serving. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. I'd like to call Probation Chief John Keene. If I can get your video up, that'd be great. Awesome. So working with San Mateo Police Department's Youth Services Bureau, can you talk about what collaborative efforts we do to prevent young people from entering the justice system?
Thank you very much, Chief, for allowing me to be here today. And also thank you, Michael, for moderating this very important panel and allowing us to have this very important discussion. You know, before I go into kind of what we have really the opportunity to work with you guys on, I want to just say that I think that the message here is one of trying to figure out how best to get at the root causes of a problem that is very much systemic in, you know, our day-to-day lives and the things that we deal with. And those of us who are blessed enough to be a part of this profession have realized for a very long time. And so with the tragic events that have happened in Minnesota, along with all the many other horrible events that have happened over the past couple of years with the negative interactions with African Americans and various police departments, my hope is that we see this as an opportunity to face the reality of our situations and look for opportunities for change. This is my 32nd year in law enforcement, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. However, I acknowledge the fact that we have to do better. And as we think about how we do better, and to kind of dovetail into your question, one of the ways I think we can create more trust within the community is very much similar to the program that you are running with us here in San Mateo. This city has shown a commitment to finding ways to divert young people from the juvenile justice system, which ultimately diverts them from the criminal system down the road. The program really is focused on trying to find early opportunities for intervention spaces. One of the things I think that we do really well in our collaborative space is to not only pull in law enforcement people, but really, frankly, to pull in people from the community who know our young people best and can focus and really kind of help to move them in a positive place. I think that the diversion program that the department and the city runs is very culturally aware and proficient in relation to the community that it serves. And honestly, I see it as a model for what can be done in other places, not only in our county, but throughout our state. The goal really is about finding ways to not only help the young people, but look at what are the issues and the factors that brought them to this space. Most young people don't wake up and decide that they're going to go find themselves in trouble with the law. Most of it is due to trauma and issues that are inherent within their family space, within their community, oftentimes issues of systemic racism, issues of systemic lack of education and resources to help advance not only them, but advance their families. We're looking at multi-intergenerational issues. And I see diversion as an opportunity to kind of start a community on the path away from that space. So the focus really is about trying to figure out how do we keep young people out the system. While I really am proud of the services that we provide in probation, I recognize, and the data shows, that young people who never entered the system at all are far more likely to be successful, to move forward, to have some more successful educational outcomes, have more successful social outcomes down the road. And as we think about how do we improve our community and our community relationships, I think a huge step is, quite frankly, having less people who are in the system in the first place, which prevents and hopefully allows for better overall relationships between community members and officers as a whole.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for all of your work, your partnership. It's just instrumental in keeping young people out of the justice system when it's unnecessary. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to call on Reverend Lorrie Owens, President of the Naacp San Mateo Chapter. Hi, Reverend Owens.
Hello.
You've been a strong partner with the San Mateo Police Department for decades. Can you give us a historical perspective on the partnership we've had with the Naacp San Mateo? And given the national climate, what are your thoughts on what we can do here in San Mateo to make an impact?
Well, first of all, again, thank you, Officer Hops and Chief Barberini, for inviting me to participate with this esteemed panel. When I look at the history of the NAACP and the San Mateo Police Department, and being a new president and new to this branch, I did talk to other members who had more of a history with the branch. But what I found and what I've seen in my time with the branch is that the San Mateo Police Department is doing something now that a lot of police departments do not do. One of the things that I was very impressed about when Chief Barberini assumed his position is one of the first things he did was he reached out and came to our meeting. He reached out to me and wanted to get to know me and the branch and our leadership. From what I learned from talking to members is that the history going way back pretty much was the same as it was probably with any other community and its police departments. There was fear, there was mistrust, there was avoidance. What I learned is that things changed dramatically when Chief Susan Mannheim arrived around 2000, and she made a point of reaching out to the community, to North Central Neighborhood Association, to the churches, and the NAACP. There were ride-along programs, PAL activities at the MLK Center that was sponsored by the San Mateo Police Department. One of the things that was noted that started about the time that Chief Mannheimer took over was the promotion of diversity and the striving to make the department more diverse. I can say that in my time with the branch, that the San Mateo Police Department has been very, very supportive and very, very willing to work with us. And I value that, and I think that that is a part of the reason that we have probably not as much, or we have activism, but it is positive and it's not, negative from the standpoint of let's kill the police, but let's engage in positive change. There are changes that still need to be made, and there are things that all of us can do. And when you ask the question, what can the San Mateo Police Department do? Well, there were about 5 things that I came up with that I think that you're doing and continue to do that will help us, particularly in this time of national pain and unrest. And the first was acknowledging the community pain. And Chief Barberini did that at the top of this town hall. People are scared. People of color are scared. I can say that not only as a president of an NAACP branch, as a pastor, assistant pastor of a church, but as a mother, I'm scared. I'm scared every time my boys leave out of the house. I'm scared that they are going to encounter a situation in a place where they may run into that 1 or 2 or 3 bad cops, where they will end up in a situation where at best they may be racially profiled, and at worst they could end up dead. So for the police department to acknowledge there's fear out there, there's real fear out there, and to understand that what has been built up by the San Mateo Police Department in this community, a lot of that was torn down by what we saw on last Monday, and there needs to be a healing, and it needs to be time for that to return. Another thing that I want to say is that we need to continue with the accountability, and that's important. I think that was an important statement by the San Mateo Police Department to not justify what happened in Minneapolis, that was wrong. Continue the community outreach, what you're doing with us, what you're doing with other community organizations. Continue to be there to meet with us, talk to us. Continue to work on the training. You talked a lot about training, and that's extremely important that in your press release, the continued training is not a one and done. Talking about things like unconscious bias. We all have that, not just white or black, but we all have that. And to continue to stress that, because that is what informs how that officer reacts in that momentary life and death situation where that decision has to be made. And when that officer sees that person as a person and not just a black thug or a Hispanic thug or whatever, then we have a situation where the right decision can be made. By the same token, we as a community have to see our officers, and I have relatives who are law enforcement, as human beings, and they are making decisions and don't provoke and don't do things that are going to escalate the problem. And another part of the training is de-escalation. $20 counterfeit bill does not warrant what we saw. We have to look at ways of de-escalating, and the police department needs to continue to train officers on how to de-escalate situations that are not life-threatening. And then continue your practices with hiring, vetting people. This is me speaking, I believe that police work is not just a profession, it's a calling. It is something that not everybody is equipped to do. So vet out those people that are not equipped to do that and truly are called to do that, and also to continue to look for ways to bring more people of color onto the force. And I think if you continue to do that, and all of these things that I just mentioned, you have started, that we will make progress. And it's going to be slow and it's going to be tedious, but we'll make progress in healing the perception and the relationship between the community and the police department. So thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Owens. And progress is why we're here today. It's about tearing down walls. It's about, building our community and being able to move forward together as one. So we couldn't do it without any of the panelists that are here today. We could definitely not do it without our community members. And speaking of our community members, we've been at Max this entire meeting with Zoom. So we know there are a lot of people waiting to get into this meeting. If you know someone who's reaching out to you and asking why they can't get in, it's because we've reached our maximum number that Zoom provides us. So we're really proud of that, but also we're saddened that not everyone can attend and watch this live. So please tell your friends and your family members that we will be posting this up on our social media channels, and they'll be able to view it and reach out to us at our email or give us a phone call with their questions. So thank you, Reverend Owens. I'd like to call to the next person is going to be San Mateo Mayor Joe Goethals. Hello, sir. So, Mayor, how does the city of San Mateo address hate? And do we have programs to show that the city is united with the community?
So, Michael, thank you very much. I want to thank Chief Ed Barberini for putting this together, and for you, Michael, and to all the panelists. This is such an important conversation for all of us to be having right now. In the wake of George Floyd's murder, this is an absolutely crucial conversation for us to be having. All of us need to understand the lived experience, not only of George Floyd, but of all African Americans in the United States. Understanding that lived experience means more than just paying attention this week. It means every day. There are lots of people who live in fear and who don't have trust, and it's on us to build that trust with the community. So as mayor here in the city of San Mateo, I'm one of the members of the city council, and I'm constantly asking myself, is the city council representative of our residents, of our community? How do we better reflect the community that we serve? Are we doing that as a council? Are we doing that on our commissions? Are we doing that in our day-to-day life? Making sure that our city is serving all of its residents in every aspect of our community is crucial. It's crucial at moments like these when we need to come together to not have factions that are underserved. And we in the city of San Mateo have to acknowledge that we have a history. We have a history of redlining. We have a history of separating our community into different groups and treating them differently. In the United States, we're treating people differently every day. We know that there's a transfer of wealth. We know that there's a different lived experience by some individuals and not others. And so it is absolutely incumbent on me as the mayor and as a member of the city council to recruit people into our city services academy so that we can better reflect the city that we serve in the best way possible. It involves a lot of listening. It involves speaking up. One of the most important relationships that the city of San Mateo has with the community is in law enforcement. As a member of the city council, we have a police department, and we manage that police department. We oversee that police department. Our oversight is absolutely critical at moments like this, making sure that we have recruited the best officers that we can find, officers who reflect the diversity and who reflect the rich values that we as San Mateo residents have. Giving our officers the best training. Some of that training was already alluded to, training to de-escalate situations, training to humanize every member of the community who we interact with, whether it's someone who's struggling with mental illness or addiction or other issues, treating that person with the fairness and dignity that they deserve. Because ultimately that person is a member of our community. They deserve the rich treatment that any one of us would expect under those circumstances. And of course, accountability. We send police officers into extremely dangerous situations. Oftentimes force needs to be used, and when force is ever used, we need to assess that situation. We as a city, we're always going to assess any use of force, as Chief Barberini mentioned. We're going to look at it just to make sure that it's in line with our own policies, to make sure that it is what we want reflected in how we treat our residents. And if there is criminal liability, then ultimately it's District Attorney Steve Wagstaffe, our elected district attorney, who makes that decision about whether it is crime and whether that person will be prosecuted. It is absolutely critical at this time that process work the way it is designed to, the way that it is supposed to treat police officers with the same fairness that anyone else would receive, no more and no less. This is an interesting time for all of us. I know that we have each, in our conversations with our families, struggled with how to articulate how we're feeling. I can't imagine giving or receiving the talk. And for those who don't understand, the talk is the conversation that you have with a young man who, a young man of color who has to know what he's going to do when he has an interaction with the police to keep himself safe so that he gets home to his mom that night. I cannot imagine what it feels like to give or receive that talk, but I sat down with my daughters recently and wanted to explain to them what that meant. Wanted to explain to them what privilege is. Wanted to explain to them their responsibility to be an ally to their friends, to listen to the lived experience of their friends, to speak up when it's time to speak up. Actions matter a great deal. This panel discussion is part of our actions in response to something that touched all of us very deeply. It is incumbent on all of us to listen and to speak up, and our actions will matter a great deal. And I believe that we can come together as a community, and that what we will see on the other side of these tragic events is a community more united, a community more dedicated to fair law enforcement, a community that values its police and values the way that our police officers treat its residents even more. We need to work every single day to earn the trust that we think police officers should have. We have to earn it every day, whether we're police officers, whether we're city council members, each and every one of us. I want to thank you all for participating, and it's good to be here with all of you in this absolutely critical conversation at this time. Thanks, Officer Hopsch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couldn't agree with you more. And yes, it just goes back to treat people the way you want to be treated. And thank you very much for sharing. As we mentioned earlier, we're at our capacity for attendees with Zoom. We have hundreds of questions coming in. We're running out of time, so we're going to jump into some of the questions before we conclude. We know that there are some questions we're not going to be able to get to. However, we will answer your questions offline, just so that you can hear back from us, because we don't want any question to go unanswered. And Mr. Mayor, since I do have you on video still, I'm going to pull up one of the questions that was offered to me. Go through some of these. Give me just a second. So, all right, well, can't find it, but I will tell you what the question was because I remember it.
Sure.
It's about police accountability, and what are your thoughts on putting on the ballot? Thank you. Will the city enact a voter-elected review board to oversee issues caused by city employees in order to maintain integrity?
I'll be honest with you, to me, that just feels like passing the buck. I feel responsible for making sure that our police are following the law, that they're enforcing the law in the proper way. And if I was to turn that responsibility that I feel that I have over to someone else, it feels like I would be trying to avoid those difficult situations. I feel like it's one of the most important things for a city council to do is to have oversight over the police department, to have a relationship with the police chief. One of my roles as the mayor and as a member of the city council is that we are accountable. The buck stops with us. And literally, when someone is a victim of a crime at the hands of a police officer, the city is not only going to represent the police officer, we're going to have an investigation into the actions of the police officer, which may result in termination, but then we're still going to be liable, and we will enter into a negotiation with the victim of that crime for civil remediation. And so we will have that liability. And I think that to pass that off to someone else when, in my opinion, no one feels more strongly and has a greater importance on the law enforcement behavior and actions than the city council does. But our responsibility is on the civil side. On the criminal side, that gets handed over to the district attorney's office. They do that investigation. It is transparent and independent, and they make a decision about whether a crime has been committed.
Thank you very much, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Really appreciate you answering that so thoroughly. We have another question. This question is for Dr. Reverend Nixon. So I get you up there. Great. Welcome. How do you think the police department can build bridges with the broader community, especially the marginalized?
Yeah, I think, something that I didn't say earlier is that I do serve a diverse congregation. We have an English-speaking congregation and a Spanish-speaking congregation. And I will tell you that the experiences of those two congregations are very different when it comes to the perception of the police, how they feel about the police, the trust of the police. One congregation feeling that they're made safer by police presence, and another not so much. And so I think, I'll really lean heavily on what my colleague and dear friend, Pastor Bussey, said about getting to know people in the communities, and also just having that presence in a way that builds relationship. I think particularly in San Mateo, in the immigrant community, so much has gone on with ICE and with the deportations that the level of fear is palpable. And so that's a big hurdle. And I think also with diverse communities, and I really want to echo what Reverend Laurie said as well. My daughter's Black, and I've had the talk, Mayor, and even in San Mateo, she just wrote an essay saying that she doesn't feel safe, and it may not be anything particular that the San Mateo police have done, but she's noticed from a really early age that when people get pulled over, they more often look like her than they look like me. And so, I mean, it's a hurdle. It's a big one. But I think that relationship building, that block by block, community by community, and knowing where, Chief, to put the right officers in the right communities, I mean, I think that will go a long way.
Indeed. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Nixon. And this next question is for the Police Officers Association. Why do police unions back officers who engage in bad behavior? And do you hold your members accountable?
Thank you for the question, Mike. So the short of it is we do not condone or support bad behavior by any member. The policies in the police department ensure that if any officer, any employee witnesses any bad behavior, that it must be reported. The Peace Officers Association exists to represent police officers for many different things, mainly to do with, sorry, I'm blanking, but the attorneys for
going off of Rory's point, no problem. So the police union, obviously, together, members pay their dues, they pay their fees, and as such, they get certain protections are awarded to them. And part of that, at different times, is legal defense, counseling, all kinds of different services. Aside from our community engagement and our activities together, legal defense is part of it. However, it does not mean that we stand for bad behavior. It does not mean that when our officers occasionally, I mean, it happens at every organization, either break policy or violate some type of ordinance or law or regulation, it does not mean that we are okay and accepting of that behavior. What it means is they have certain protections awarded to them because of the fees that they pay. And yes, we make sure that every member goes through a particular process, whether that be, long-term vetting, criminal cases, internal reviews, but it does not mean that we stand for bad officers. We do not stand for bad officers. We do not stand for bad behavior. We never have, and we never will at San Mateo.
Thank you, Allison. Perfect.
Thank you. And this is live, so I mean, they have not seen these questions, so thank you for answering that without any prompts. You were just ready for it. Thank you. This next question, it's for Reverend Dr. Bussey and Reverend Owens. If you both can turn on your video. As leaders of Black organizations, what would you like to see as acts of support and solidarity for the greater good of the community? Reverend Dr. Bussey, if you'd like to start.
Yes. What I would like to see, first of all, is I think it's really important for people to be heard. You know, the marches that we see and even the riots that we see, which I don't condone, but I understand because Martin Luther King said that riots are the language of the unheard. And so people are so frustrated. This situation is at such a boiling point that what happened in Brentwood, California was an outstanding example of what should happen in San Mateo and in every other community across the country. The police chief came out and actually talked to the protesters and thanked them for being orderly, and they had a conversation. And I think that more than anything else, people need to be heard. And then the other thing is that justice needs to be served. You know, when we all watched a man basically executed on a sidewalk. And then it was 48 hours before that officer was arrested. And the other three who stood there and did nothing have still not been charged. That's hard to take. It's like, again, the African-American community is not being heard. They are not feeling valued or validated or even humanized. Because if an animal had been treated like that on a sidewalk, PETA and everybody else would have been up in arms about it. So we're all up in arms. It's what we do with our feelings and our pain and our horror of what we've seen that makes the difference.
Well, I don't know that I would have a whole lot more to add except to underscore that there is a tremendous amount of pain in the African-American community. And that pain is not just from this one incident. It's not just from recent incidents. It's not even from what we hear in the news. The pain is from things that we live every day. I have pain from having my, what was then 12-year-old grandson followed and asked to explain why was he walking in our neighborhood. He has a backpack on his back. He's walking home from school because he couldn't possibly live in this particular neighborhood because he's Black. I have the pain of hearing my husband get in an elevator and when it opens and he's the only person there and a Caucasian lady is, and this is happening every day. I'm not talking about this was back in the day. This is every day. He has to bear with the indignity of the woman letting the elevator go, or if he's the one walking in, she'll walk out because the perception is that African Americans are rapists and he's going to do something to her. We have to acknowledge our pain. Sometimes I think that we, especially when we work in the professional world, pretend like it's not there, but we have to acknowledge that we live through this. And what we have to do in a way that we can explain to our non-Black friends is that this is something that we go through every day. And the white privilege that you live with is something that prevents you from understanding it at the level that we're talking about, but don't tell me that it's not happening. And as we're trying to really connect on that level to say that this is not only historical, this is little microaggressions that are happening daily, and figure out a way working together how we're going to get past this. It is not a Black problem, it is not a brown problem, and it is not a white problem. This is an American problem. And we know, as it states in the Bible, and I'm not trying to push religion on everybody, but a house divided cannot stand. we have to work on this together. We have to acknowledge what's going on. We have to communicate like we're doing right now. And we have to come up with actionable, real, serious ways to move forward and not pretend like everything is beautiful, because it's not. There is beauty in the world, but there is a very real pain, and there's a very real reality that those of us who are of color live with every day.
If I can, I just want to add one more thing to this. I think it's important for everyone to understand that while all of us are dealing with COVID-19 as a pandemic, African Americans are dealing with a double pandemic, and racism is the other pandemic for us. And so, as Reverend Laurie said, every single day of every single year, we deal with one of those pandemics. And so to have COVID-19 on top of it is just, it's just too much. And so we really do need, people to really get in touch with the pain that we're feeling, and then figure out what each person can do to make this world the place that we all want to live in.
Thank you both. It's these conversations. I mean, I feel it right in my heart. I can't thank you enough. It's these conversations that will help us turn the page and have a new America, which is what we need. So thank you. This next question is for DA Wagstaffe. Why is the Minneapolis DA only seeking third-degree murder charges? And is the DA investigation public?
Well, the investigation has been announced by that DA. He has not yet given any of the details. However, I also understand the governor of the state of Minnesota has asked the attorney general to step in, review it, and increase the charge if appropriate. I have read the Minnesota law. California does not have a third-degree murder charge, which is what that officer is charged with. And for us, it would be what occurred here. We would charge either as a first or second degree, depending on statements made and what else was there. First-degree murder in both Minnesota and California requires that it was premeditated and that the person involved intended for the person to die. Weighed and balanced the pros and cons. I've given this argument many times. Weighed the pros and cons and decided to go forward by killing the person. And that would be the challenge that the Minnesota prosecutors have to assess on what was said. The other question that's been asked is mentioned here tonight by the pastor, and that is, what about the other three? I've already talked to our state DA's association about our law, which imposes no duty on a private citizen or an officer to step in. And that is something that is worthy of at least legislative discussion with the law enforcement agencies around the state and our legislature. If somebody just stands and watches somebody else doing anything, amazing as it may sound, under both California law and Minnesota law, that is not a crime. Now, if they stood there helping hold him down, different matter, they can be charged. But just standing there, to me, it remains. I've been saying this for years.
DA Wagstaffe, we lost the last bit of your thought.
Okay, let me repeat. The last thought I had was first-degree murder. I think, did that come out about what's required for first-degree murder?
Yes.
Okay. The other part is there have been questions posed. I think the Reverend Pat asked the question, what about those other three? California law, Minnesota law, there is no duty of an officer or any private citizen to step in when they see a crime occurring to stop that crime. There may be a moral duty, there may be a civil liability, but in terms of criminal culpability, it does not exist. I personally feel it ought to exist. There is a duty on parents. If a parent does not step in to protect their child, they can be guilty of child endangerment. And so that's part of the difficulty that exists, is depending on what those officers did. If they touched the victim, if they helped hold him down, that's a different matter. But if all they did was stood and watch under, it appears to be Minnesota law, and it's definitely California law, presently in California, not a crime.
Thank you, District Attorney Wagstaffe. The next question is for Probation Chief Keene. What ways are you working with local or regional organizations centering their work around restorative justice practices? And how has that impacted recidivism?
So I think what we have tried to do in our department is work very closely with community-based organizations here in our county to try to develop not only programs that we know work just because it was anecdotal, but also we've looked at focusing on evidence-based practices and emerging practices. We know that restorative justice programs have success rates. We've seen the work in restorative justice spaces actually have really profound results in our school districts. When we think about what's called the school to prison pipeline, a huge part of kind of derailing that kind of process is how you address school-based discipline. And so while we've seen recidivism go down dramatically for young people and adults, quite frankly, in our county for a while now, we think that a lot of that is due to this cohesive process by which, the county programs or the county partners work closely with CBOs. And so every year we partner directly with CBOs utilizing state funds for prevention work. There's also a stream of funding for CBOs to work with young people who are juvenile justice involved. Our role as the kind of county or government beneficiary is to kind of monitor those people, make sure that the programs are working effectively and efficiently, and that they are good stewards of the public funds that are provided to them to do this partnership. I will tell you that I feel very fortunate to be a part of that process in our county. We have great partners throughout the county who we entrust every day to help provide good services to our young people, whether it's school-based services, legal aid services. We have programs that are focused on after-school programs. We have great partnerships with the Y. We have great partnerships with the Boys and Girls Clubs, for examples, where they provide a wide range of opportunities for young people. The diversion program that you guys have in your city and the department, one of the key benefits of it is the idea that you have partnerships that help to address the mental health needs of the young people and their families. These are all very critical parts of this very holistic approach to provide services to young people. It certainly cannot just be simply done by a governmental entity. It has to be done through this really closely knit public-private partnership to provide opportunities for people that we think can have long-lasting effects.
Thank you, Chief Keene. The next question is for Chief Barberini. If the same situation that happened in Minneapolis, the same tragic situation that happened there, happened here in San Mateo, do you feel that your police officers' training would have made a different outcome here in this city?
Absolutely. Not only training, but philosophy, approach in how we serve the community, a culture that promotes a care and responsibility to the community. And I say that twofold. One is the act by the officer that committed this act, in himself. I think our training would be just the first step in preventing an act like that. And clearly, we don't train or teach our officers to do anything like that, and it would be so foreign and outside the realm of what we teach that I would not foresee that happening in our environment. The second is, and it's been talked about a couple times here, are the three officers that were there with that officer. Although it may not be, it may not violate any legal statute, as DA Wagstaffe has articulated. As a police officer, as a human being, I have it's my interpretation, or it's my feeling that I have a moral obligation to step in and interfere when I see something like that happening. And I know that I'm confident in our officers in this department, not only in the San Mateo Police Department, but throughout the county. It's been my experience during the last 25 years that if I saw an officer acting in that manner, or if other officers that I've worked with throughout the course of my career had observed that behavior, that they would step in and intervene. And frankly, not to that extent, but I've experienced that. I've experienced, police officers are human beings. People have tempers. people have good days and they have bad days. And I think that we recognize that in our coworkers, because that, and we, especially when we spend so much time together, when somebody's not on top of their game or having a bad day, and it's beholden on all of us to recognize that and step in to make sure that the right thing is done. It was mentioned before that, we ask our police officers to do a very difficult job. We often hire people at a very young age, where their life experience is not what it would be when they reach the ripe old age that I'm at now. And we ask them to make decisions based on a limited level of experience. And I'm not talking about just law enforcement experience. I value life experience more than I just value the time that you spend wearing a uniform. So I think there's two answers to that question, and both those answers are that I think the outcome would be extremely different, not only in the San Mateo Police Department, but I'm confident of that with our surrounding departments in the area, knowing how professional they are. That I could not imagine seeing an officer act in that manner, and B, I could not see his fellow officers allowing that to occur.
Thank you, Chief. We're reaching the end of our meeting, just have a few minutes left. So as we close out, I'd like to invite all of our panelists to share some last-minute remarks. If you can, turn on all of your videos, and if we can just take a minute or so to just to wrap up. And we'll just go from the top of my screen. We'll go with DA Wagstaffe.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to everybody who is listening today, everybody who's on this panel, and to Chief Barberini and his team. Everybody has reiterated one word tonight: communicate. I think you're all right. It's watching for, again, 43 years in the system now, and I've seen this up and down again and again. It can be so discouraging, but communication is the way to get out there. And that's what discourages me about what happened in Minnesota. Ever since what happened back in Missouri and around that time, I know law enforcement in San Mateo County has worked tirelessly to repair the relationships with our community. And all it takes is the act of one criminal officer in Minnesota to throw us back years. And that's disheartening. But we still have to have hope. We still have to move forward. We can't give up. As much as times I say, I'm traveling the same road I've done for decades. I look at the people here on this group with me, this panel with me, and I say, with that leadership in San Mateo, it can be achieved. The hope of ending bigotry and racism in all aspects of our community, it can change. So you tonight have given me hope, and I'm grateful to all of you, my fellow panel members, for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chief Keene?
Just kind of want to reiterate DA Wagstaff's point of thank yous to everyone on this panel. Thank you very much for allowing me an opportunity to be here. I would just say in closing, I know that that the community and many of the folks who have joined our call are frustrated by the fact that they may not have had all their questions answered, or may feel as if there's a degree of dodging the big topics happening here. I would just say to them that I believe in this community. I believe in our ability and our resiliency to do the right thing. As a man of color, as a Black man, I live every day with the opportunities to kind of experience both sides of this coin. And I recognize that at times we're going to be challenged, and I'm going to be challenged personally in how I live my life every day and how my interactions happen with those people that I have the honor to work with in this community. But I say that as a person who is proud to work here, proud to be a part of our community, and know that we have the ability to learn from this horrible experience and, quite frankly, be better because of it. It's a tragedy to have a man have to lose his life for these hard conversations to happen. But I'm a firm believer, as a man of faith, that things happen and provides opportunities even in hard times. So I'm really pleased to be a part of this conversation and hope to be so moving forward. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chief Keene. Reverend Dr. Bussey?
I'd like to thank you, Chief Barberini, for your leadership. I think that that your open letter and this forum tonight indicates that you want to make sure that something like what has happened in Minneapolis will never happen in San Mateo, and I appreciate that. I would also like to, I just wonder, because I got an email, a couple emails before we went online tonight, talking about the what is it called? Oh gosh, my brain's escaping me. The curfew overnight for the next 2 nights, and the protests tomorrow. And I feel like we shouldn't leave this forum without speaking to that, because the curfews are preemptive. And so that says something to the community, that maybe the police department is expecting things to get out of hand rather than expecting that things will be peaceful. So I think that it's really important. I know we only have a couple minutes, but I think it's really important to speak to that before we end the call. Thank you for allowing me to participate tonight.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Bussey. Chief, at the end, maybe with your conclusion, if you could please cover that. We just have a couple of minutes left. Reverend Owens? You're muted, ma'am. Let me unmute you. There you go.
Thank you very much. I know time is short, but thank you very much for this opportunity to have a difficult conversation. Thank you, Chief Barberini, for your leadership. I wish every police chief across the nation was doing this. Unfortunately, we know that that's not happening. The NAACP stands ready to continue to work for the promotion of civil rights for people of color and all in our community. There will be an op-ed piece in a Daily Journal tomorrow where we're talking a little bit more about that, but just want to thank you for the dialogue and asking that we continue.
Thank you, Reverend Owens. Can I hear from Officer McMilton and Officer Gilmore?
Sure. Just like to thank you guys for all participating. Thank you everybody for watching. We really appreciate this opportunity to address everybody, and we look forward to trying to repair our relationship with the community.
And just going off of that point, in what we heard tonight, it is very important, especially for us patrol officers, to make sure that we are in fact getting out of our vehicle, talking with people, keeping lines of communication open, working with Chief Barberini, and probably doing more citizen academies, speaking at churches, talking with people, but most importantly, looking people eyeball to eyeball and having a conversation. And I pledge to do that. I know Lorrie and I talked about it earlier, and we're going to make sure that our POA members know that needs to be a focus right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Reverend Dr. Nixon?
Yeah, I know that some people have spoken about hope, and I know it's my job to have hope, but I also feel like I have hope if hope means engagement, especially for white people who are on this call, for us to not to just say, oh, we're not racist, but to be anti-racist and to really do our internal work, because this is centuries old. This is not just about what happened this week. It's a pattern. And I'm grateful for Chief Barberini. I'm grateful for this opportunity and for your heart and your passion. And I will join arms with anybody who wants to make San Mateo a better place.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Nixon. Mayor Goethals?
Thank you very much, Michael. A couple of things I wanted to say. This trust has to be earned every single day. It is, it's not right to say that it can't happen here. It's not right to describe this as if this is something that only happens in other places in Minnesota. We have to look ourselves in the mirror and understand what happens right here. There are many instances of force that have happened that need to have some accountability. And unless we hold them accountable, then we are not earning that trust, and we are not keeping our commitment to the people who we serve. So that's something that we all need to acknowledge, and we need to continue to work on. We need to be vigilant. We need to speak up and not let this happen anymore and hold it accountable. I want to address tomorrow night. Chief Barberini will be there. There will be many San Mateo police officers who will be there, and we will be protecting the protesters and their rights and making sure that they have access and that all of their speakers are heard, and we will be marching with them for a worthy cause. And we'll also make sure that that the entire protest is peaceful from beginning to end, and that means that making sure people get home safely as well. Thank you all, and I will see many of you tomorrow night.
Thank you, Mayor Goethals. Chief Barberini?
Sure. First, to address the curfew question, which I think is a great question. I'm glad we're not ending without addressing that. The curfew was established today by the county. It's a county-wide curfew that extends from 8:30 p.m. to 5 a.m. for the next 2 evenings. It's not specific to the city of San Mateo. It was not a decision by our city council. It was a decision made by the county board of supervisors, and it's in response to a couple of things. We have experienced some difficulties in this county over the last several nights. Last night in the southern end of the county, there was some difficulties regarding some interference with Highway 101 and some difficulties in a couple cities in the southern end of San Mateo County. We've also received some specific, very specific social media information regarding looting in certain parts of the county that have identified certain areas or targets for looters. We believe that's fairly reliable based on what we're learning from other parts of the Bay Area. And I think what the county did is they took a look at all of that information, and in the interest of caution, they decided to make that decision. I do not anticipate it will interfere with tomorrow night's event in the city of San Mateo. We've been working closely with the organizers of that protest, and we believe it'll be, that protest, based on the schedule that they provided, will be concluded well in advance of that 8:30 time frame. And we look forward to providing those folks a avenue to express themselves, to exercise their fundamental right to free speech. We want to make it as safe as possible. However, we also know that those well-intentioned protesters or those who are organizing organized peaceful protests have been manipulated by those who are looking to cause some trouble. And we're hoping and doing our best to ensure that that's not the case for tomorrow night. We're confident that those who are organizing the event are very well intentioned and mean no harm to the property or persons within our city. And we look forward to working with them. And we also look forward to doing what we can to make sure that their event is not compromised by those who are wishing to do harm to others. So that's kind of the background behind the curfew. I just want to make it clear that it was a countywide decision, and defending Mr. Mayor, he was not part of that. So that's the basis for that decision for the county. In conclusion, I want to thank all of the attendees. This was it's easy to conduct public outreach and do the community policing thing and do all those buzzwords when times are good. It's not so easy when times are bad. However, when times are bad or times are tough is when we need it the most. So that was the decision and the rationale behind getting out and doing this in a timely manner. We hope it was worthwhile. Familiarity breeds relationships. Relationships breed trust. The nice thing about this panel tonight is I didn't have to call anybody for the first time and introduce myself. We had all met, we had all connected, and I can't tell you how valuable that is. And if we can just expound on that and use that model as a community to develop those relationships that hopefully will evolve into that sense of trust on a larger scale, maybe we can start to move in the right direction. I also want to help people understand that we know, and I know that there's really no finish line to this. I know that long after I'm gone, we're still going to be trying to move in the right direction, nudge the ball moving forward. And small steps may need to be taken in the beginning so we can take larger steps down the road. I think we'll always have room to improve. And I think that once we become satisfied with where we're at is when we get into a perilous point, and we can never become apathetic or passive about or comfortable with where we are. We always need to look to improve. Before I let everybody go, just to to echo what Chief Keene had mentioned, we fully recognize and comprehend that in 90 minutes on a Zoom conversation, that, you know, scratching the surface is probably being generous is to what we're doing here. But we have to start somewhere, and we're hopeful that that this is something that that people find useful, whether it's the panel members or those that are watching or those that watch at a later date. I would encourage folks to take the survey. We really want to measure. We don't want to do this just for the sake of doing it. Whatever we decide to do and however we move forward, we want to make sure that it's productive and we're doing it for a reason. So that your participation in that survey will really point us in the right direction, and let us know whether this is something we want to do again, or whether we need to kind of amend our approach and steer the ship in a different direction. So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Michael. You did a great job, Michael, for your first time. Thank you for keeping us all in line and all on target. We are 5.5 minutes over, so that's probably my fault. I will take the blame for that. But thank you for everything that you've done as the moderator. I truly appreciate your time and everybody else's. So thank you.
My pleasure, Chief. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And this concludes our meeting. Please look for our survey coming up with this recorded session on our social media platforms. Have a good evening, and looking forward to the next time we do this. Bye, everyone.